The title of this panel is Coping with Christmas. And when I began to think about it, I wondered about the word coping. Coping sounds to me like something maybe negative or difficult, or an experience to be endured like an illness or a traumatic event. And I just wondered, are we starting from the place that, from a place that reflects what Christmas is really maybe about? However, listening to people talking generally and not related in any way to illness, I suppose the experience of depression seems to bring a high level of stress. And recent years have brought an even higher degree of stress due to financial difficulties. Although during our Celtic Tiger years, it still seemed to generate stress, and having plenty of money to spend wasn't an insurance policy against being stressful around Christmas. I also want to say just at this point that whilst this sharing is about family because of my own experience, but I am aware that there are probably people here who may be on their own and coping with depressive illness and feeling particularly vulnerable at this time, so it's not in any way meant to exclude anybody. This sharing is about my own experience of coping with Christmas as a family member, where a diagnosis of depressive illness could affect times of celebration. In the early 70s, my husband Derek was diagnosed initially with depression and subsequently with bipolar disorder. And the diagnosis meant for us a journey very much into the unknown. Back in 1970, nobody talked about mental illness, and the experience left me feeling, in a way, that we were different from other families. And I know that the feelings and emotions I experienced then were akin to grief and loss that might be experienced following bereavement. Family members do need to guard against becoming depressed themselves, particularly when an episode of illness in their relative continues over a long period. For me, reaching a stage of acceptance was greatly helped by Derek's own courageous acceptance of his own situation. And with this came vital compliance with recommended treatments. I do believe that, having lived with the condition closely for quite a number of years now, that people who experience depressive illness live their lives at what I call the honours level, the honours course level of life, with heroic efforts being made on a daily basis. Looking back on myself in younger years, I would think of myself as having been what I call an all or nothing person. For example, when I was into saving money, if I couldn't put away the amount that I had committed myself to in my head, I saved nothing and spent everything. Or if I started a diet and I transgressed on a Monday, I'd end up binging for the week. It was all or nothing. And in coping with the early years of Derek's illness, I always wanted to postpone everything until it was 100% better. I felt that celebrating anything or getting on with life could only be done when he was totally recovered. And I remember back one Christmas when he was quite depressed, and I did the head in the sand bit for as long as I could and pretended that Christmas wasn't going to happen. And I remember distinctly walking away from the consultant's office and realising that recovery still had a way to go, and finally accepting that Christmas was less than a week away and having to allocate 2 days to decorate and sort the house, 2 days to organise food and 2 days for shopping. And of course we did have a good Christmas, even if I was slightly exhausted. Learning that occasions like Christmas could be celebrated in a less stressful way and enjoyed even with the dreaded depressive illness hovering in the background was a valuable lesson, and one that has helped me in other areas of my life. Something I learned in this regard was not to wait for perfection. Now is the moment, regardless of what else may be happening. As regards being an all or nothing person, I feel that influence probably came about in my upbringing because my late mother set very high standards, influenced by her strong work ethic. And I grew up believing that to enjoy Christmas properly, everything had to be the best it could possibly be. No shop-bought cake or anything like that was ever allowed to cross the threshold of our house, and everything was scrubbed and polished within an inch of its life. Having to develop more flexible plans means that the ups and downs of life can be more easily accommodated. I do occasional talks like this, and the sharings I always feel are about before and after, because the way I coped with the illness changed considerably for me with the commencement of Aware. Prior to that, I invested serious energy in anxiety and worry. And although I was not familiar with the word catastrophising back then, the moment I first heard the word, I knew it described me at times. In relation to Christmas, no matter how well Derek was, I always anticipated the possible onset of illness. It was like an insurance policy. If I imagine the worst can happen, then maybe it won't. Any major celebration I would have approached in the same way. When a consultant psychiatrist here at St Patrick's Hospital established an information and support programme for relatives of bipolar patients in 1985, I attended that first group for family members. And this enabled me for the first time to meet with other relatives of people who experience bipolar disorder, and gave me the opportunity to learn more about the illness and how it can be managed, with the view to minimising the effects on both the person who experiences the illness and his or her family. Coming together with people who could all say, "I understand," was a unique and wonderful experience for me, and enabled me to cope with some of our concerns about the future. Coping with the illness prior to that for almost 15 years on our own was a bit like trying to do a jigsaw with some of the pieces missing. Being part of that early relatives group was like being allowed for the first time to see a bigger picture and to banish much of the anxiety and the word I'm getting to like it, catastrophising, I experienced up to that time, and consequently made times like Christmas enjoyable events rather than times to be dreaded. Support groups have many functions and benefits, but having a safe, non-judgmental and confidential space to share one's feelings and thoughts around what is sometimes a taboo subject is invaluable. Having the opportunity to voice out loud for the first time, perhaps, one's innermost thoughts can lead to finding solutions from within, previously undiscovered, and can begin a whole new journey of self-awareness. A sad subject that I need to touch on now is that of bereavement. A loss can appear more painful at Christmas time. This experience of grief is the opposite to the feelings of joy and celebration we expect to feel at this time. This is normal for those in this sad and difficult place. And having lost a precious baby girl on Christmas Eve, I know only too well how inappropriate it can be to have to listen to Christmas music, etc., in the midst of grieving. The saying that time will heal appears an impossibility, but as time goes by, healing slowly soothes our pain. And whilst never, of course, forgetting our loss, we now have a darling granddaughter who brings her own incredible joy to our family. I've put together a few bullet points that taken from stuff I did before, and I've kind of changed them around for Christmas. Just things to remember. Don't put pressure on oneself. Christmas is really only one day. Turn down invitations if it's in your own interests, but do consider accepting the invitations and cutting short the time maybe that they involve spending in company. Ask for help from family and friends. If entertaining at home, suggest that guests might like to bring one course of the meal with them. This is perfectly acceptable, and people usually welcome the opportunity to contribute and help. Confide in family or friends if there are difficulties around the illness. Trying to pretend everything is fine does cause extra pressure. Don't try to be Darina Allen. Shop-bought food items are fine, and probably nobody will even know that you were not slaving over a hot stove all day. Try to remember too that we're not preparing for a famine. Shops will be open the day after Christmas, so we don't need the pressure of trying to do a major shop. Try to take the focus off overindulgence in alcohol by providing alternatives. Alcohol is a depressant and can have a very negative effect on everybody's mood. Allow the person who might not be feeling in great mood to escape for a break without feeling guilty. And give affirmation if you're a family member for small steps taken towards recovery. Remember that the perfect family enjoying the perfect Christmas is a creation of the media and retail trade. Remember too to keep prescriptions up to date and have medication as prescribed available if there are bank holidays involved. I appreciate that we all follow the path of our own beliefs, and in times of difficulty, faith and trust can disappear. But I feel that here I have to acknowledge that prayer and trust do help me to cope, as does believing that whatever happens in this flawed human world is part of greater universal plan. I'm just finishing with a little quote that I like. I don't know why it reminds me of Christmas. It's from Anton Chekhov, and it is, "We shall find peace, we shall hear angels, and we shall see the sky sparkling with diamonds." Thank you very much.